Okay, well, we're just going to get started on the Lead and Change webinar. My name is Dan Francis. I am a development consultant here at NUS, and I work within the membership development team. I'm joined by, on the phone, I'm joined by, do you want to introduce yourself?
Hi, I'm Noah. I'm the General Secretary of the Studios at Lead and Change.
Thanks, Noah.
Hey, I'm Priscilla Mensa. I'm the current president of the Cambridge University Students' Union, and I was at Lead and Change in Warwick.
Great.
Hi, I'm Nona. I'm the General Secretary at LSE Students' Union, and I was at Lead and Change Warwick.
Cool, thanks guys. And so the purpose of today is to have a bit of a kind of refresh on some of the content, but primarily just to get your reflections as a group on what you think worked in terms of the course and what you've learned and gained from it, how it's helped you during the last sort of 6 months in office. I'm a developer for one of the co-developers for this content, and so I'm quite kind of au fait with what went into the course and how it was put together. But just to kind of recap on what the course itself looked like, the framework, we did a review in advance of this Lead and Change, and through the review, which involved consulting with a whole range of staff, officers, former officers, and NUS staff, basically agreed 8 kind of key areas that should form part of all of our summer training programs, and so we focused on some core to all topics, which were personal leadership, communicating and influencing skills, building a network, understanding and engaging your students, and then content which would be specifically tailored depending on which Lead and Change course people were on. Obviously this one is directed at presidents, around being a student officer, policy knowledge and political ideas that you require in order to do the job, the context of working in a student union and a higher education environment, and then to prioritise and plan for your year ahead. And given that this was the president's course and the unique kind of and similar officer role, I should say, given that it was that kind of that chair of the board, that lead officer role, we focus a lot in the content of this course on personal leadership, and that was a kind of it took up a key kind of proportion of our time. Almost a third of the time was spent on developing personal leadership, understanding values, and so. And I think a lot of the questions that we'll be asking today are kind of focused around that. So, started. Yeah, they were for me. Let's get started then. It's probably better because you're on the phone. If I call on you to speak, if you've got something big to say, shout. But just because I appreciate it might be quite difficult for you to kind of contribute otherwise. So. My question is then, reflecting back on the course kind of as a whole, what is your main takeaway from 3 days? What do you think is the thing which really is stuck with start with you, Nona?
Thinking about it, one of the things is definitely network with people, the actual course, but I think thinking through sort of intervention, I think that was the bit that really resonated with me. So, to frame a debate or sort of disruptive decision making, that sort of thing. So when I've been dealing with issues in my union, thinking about how to sort of engage with an issue in like a more sort of nuanced way. I think that's probably the thing that I use quite regularly about thinking about issues.
That's really interesting. Can you think of a time when maybe you've approached something differently as a result of that? Whereas, before the course you might have considered a different way, or you've checked yourself before you have it.
Yeah, I guess one of my campaign issues has been around halls rents, and so I'd be more affordable and cheaper. However, the decisions being taken at the moment aren't whether to reduce them, it's whether to increase them. So instead of trying to sort of frame the debate around £100 a week or whatever, something like that, it's been like having to intervene where a decision is being made and stop that from going through in order to achieve that goal.
That's really interesting, isn't it? And if you think about it from a values context, like we're not starting a playing field, and we're not necessarily having the fight that we want to have.
Yeah.
The discussion is already framed differently, isn't it? That's interesting. Priscilla, question to you then. What do you think from the course as a whole, reflecting back, what are your main kind of learning points? What has been most useful?
For me, I'll first start by saying that I thought leading change was absolutely phenomenal. I think leading change alongside the Black Leaders Conference, the conferences that any have done for me personally that were most expansive and developing and the thing that comes back again and again when I think about it even today from leading change was the idea of like looking at values. And for president, I knew exactly what I wanted to do and how I wanted to strategize around doing those things. But I didn't, and because I'm very much the person, I'm inclined to just trying to get action done. I didn't really spend that much time thinking about what my values were. I was there before leading change, and I think Tutor way too short was like, I don't talk about my values, I just do them, and people kind of like glean from doing what my values are. And it was at first quite frustrating, but then really challenging and strengthening to have to think and articulate what my values were.
Again and again. Because it's also not often when you're in the office and like generally when you're working, you don't actually, like to say to, even in a work environment, I'll take a couple of days out, maybe 3 days, I'm just going to think about my values and be like, sure, that's entirely reasonable. Yeah. But, it's great, I suppose. Yeah. One of the things which we really did want to do through the course is to create a space for that. Yeah. So to hear that. Yeah, and it wasn't, you don't really get, like you said, that's a real fortune. It's not everyone who gets a chance to take a couple of days just to think. Yeah. And that was what at first was stressful, but very, very comforting, was that this was not thinking geared towards something. It was just about trying to develop, understand, and explore yourself. Yeah. And that can feel like navel gazing, but sometimes navel gazing is like really, really necessary. So. That's great. Do you have any? What are your reflections? What do you think was most useful from the course?
So I think about this last night, and I think it was reflecting on what leader is and what you view yourself as a leader. Yeah. Really important because I was like had leadership roles and I think you don't know how much leadership role you take on in general and the responsibilities thrust upon you. And I did that early on before you really got the full force of that responsibility. I think about what kind of leader I want to be and I can reflect that. I think that was really good to take on because yeah.
That's really interesting. It leads me on to my second question, really, which was the first exercise which we did intentionally right there at the start and put front and centre was basically draw the leader you want to be, draw image of yourself as a leader. Now, do you think that has changed since the course, or do how do you feel you're achieving against that initial image that you gather there?
When I said at first I want to be like approachable, but also all these different things, I felt probably and I thought you have to be a bit more discerning with my group. I would hope they would say that even more than I realised, especially in the university context, you have to be more like people are kind of, I don't know, not thinking for your full kind of your leadership role, and in their minds they're probably thinking of, this one comes and then actually being able to have those hard, awkward conversations and being a lot further. I think I've taken that a lot more, while still hopefully being a lot more approachable to talk about things and how I do.
That's an interesting balance to have to strike and to know which to employ. Well, let's go around the people that are in the room. What are your reflections on that? And the initial exercise where you drew a leader, and then how is it now?
So I'd say that what I drew then didn't change.
Can I ask you to mute your mic if you're listening in, because we're getting a bit of feedback. That's great. Thanks.
Alright, so what I found the exercise, again, it was the first exercise, I found it quite tricky because there's a lot of quite uncomfortable about it. Was very much like driven commitment specifically towards two things, diversity, conclusion, thirdly actually being fairness and equality of opportunity, and that hasn't changed in the slightest. I think, again, going back to the first question, had the opportunity to really articulate that those are my values, and have actually probably been my values for a long time, but have actually articulated them until that point. They're now so firm because I had the opportunity to change that, yeah, I definitely would say they've changed. They've probably very much stayed firm in my mind, and I've sort of shifted and adapted my campaign strategies around those goals, which is really nice.
Yeah, it is nice. That is nice. What about you, Nana?
Yeah, the exercise is good, and I think when I drew a person with like 3 heads, because like you've got to wear sort of the student representative hat, and then the sort of organisational chair of the trustee board hat, and then you're the university, the council or whatever, and that sort of thing. And I think that really helped crystallise my role, because I was a second year SAB as well. But I think I'm more aware of those different roles. I find it quite hard to balance out and know one too much, if I'm acting too much like sort of like a student representative in a organisational context, things like that. So I think it's definitely aware of the different like roles that I play as a leader, but I'm probably like then more aware of like the challenges I face sort of doing those effectively and how they interact.
And I think one of the key challenges of any student officer role is being conscious of when you're shifting between those two roles. It's not to say necessarily that there's right and wrong with this. I think that it is about balance and making sure that you're employing the right strategy for each issue when it comes up. And it's not clear cut all of the time, I don't think. No. That's interesting. I think kind of one of the things that we want to do with the course, obviously, and through each of these areas, is build leaders who are able to take on not just their local challenges, but also support with national ones. Do you think that the course has kind of prepared you and helped kind of shape how we respond to some of the national challenges, how you've responded locally to national challenges? We'll start with Priscilla.
So one of your other questions is about sort of the ways in which we look at representation and how representation works, and that is always such a fraught question, because I think there is, particularly when you're thinking about the way that liberation politics must be integral to an organisation like this and what a students' union does, there's often a confusion between pure representation, effective representation, and symbolic representation. Now, the national picture, the one thing that I've had the most input in when it comes to the national picture most recently was the green paper. Right. And I think going back to Lead and Change and having those conversations about representation, I like to think that me and other people that got the chance to be there really do think very specifically about how, when you look at the way the green paper speaks about GME students in a way that can, I think is quite throwaway, quite surface. When you think of the fact that, you very rarely get the mention of mature students or postgraduate students, and they're not afforded the same political significance as undergraduates. I really hope has equipped presidents and external officers and general secretaries like myself to think clearly when it comes to those individuals and groups. Did you consult with them when doing your green paper research? Did you ask those questions? Because rotationally, it's likely that those individuals are making up the majority of your institution. They might be, and in those cases, they're all the more important to consult, or equally important to consult. And so, with the green paper, I'd say made me all the more sensitive to thinking about how representation works and how you're going and consulting.
A form of that representation you're adopting when you're doing that. With what authority do you speak, and with what evidence or with what backing are you being representative on those issues? Right. That's really interesting. It was one of my questions. I'm glad that you've linked it through to this, because I think this is probably ways to illustrate it and make it more real. So Nana, do you have any thoughts on that in terms of how the course content, how the sessions kind of support just with your local stuff, but with responses to some national challenges?
I think it really helps in terms of build the network at Lead and Change, and really the kind of president officers, so then when you do have these discussions, talk about them more, but also I think it opens up to different of arguments. Very important, and I think Priscilla was talking about the green paper, so I'll talk about want. And I think explaining to students what that means to them, because a lot of people are like, oh, what is better? I get access to more money. But like, oh, it's better for some people. But when you start, I learned so much more about the actually people digging in and explaining to people. They start to get a bit more worried and they want to join into the campaign.
Yeah.
When I'm talking to everybody, ask them like, why you go and do all these things? I say it with a bit of like understand the issue, and even if personally I'm not going to experience it, it's about the future generation of students. That's
really interesting, the kind of projection of like a values consideration onto a purely policy. You cannot necessarily know what to do with that. And it's interesting the way that things are framed around individual benefit versus the way that you just described there about trying to change some people's perspectives on that and thinking a bit more of a collective way. That's really interesting. Nona, do you have any thoughts on that point?
Yeah, I think the best thing is really sort of giving some sense of a framework for like decision making or like thinking about problems. And I think empowering for like a lot of student officers, necessarily like at the forefront of like political issues, and I think a lot of people are more engaged as a result of the things in lead and change. Why is probably in the student movement is often tendency to say something bad because rather than sort of articulating it more sort of like in a nuanced way. I think the way it's broken down with like campaign theory and all that sort of thing, we really get as often as like in our unions or we're doing sort of about priorities, and I think just having more of a framework to think about like why things are wrong, like if someone's challenging you, how you can defend it, has been for particular things like the green paper.
Yeah. That's interesting. And again, I guess it's that space outside of your union to think about it, to actually spend some time thinking about it rather than responding to it is helpful. With values, and my next question was about kind of how it helps you to understand your values, and I think you've kind of gone some way to answering that. But I don't know if you recall the kind of the inner mastery, outer impact stuff that we were able to do. I don't know if I can. It's just inner mastery, outer impact. That's all it says.
Okay.
All it says. There's no content on the site. So inner mastery, outer impact. Idea of intrinsic versus extrinsic values, and we've talked about this a lot. But do you, even after 6 months in the job, like over the time since the course, you've had greater clarity on where you stand on some of those on your values?
Yeah.
That we've been talking about.
Definitely. I can. We up together as a whole group, a whole elected officer team with the theme for a year, which was equality of opportunity. And definitely out of my lead and change discussions came my values, which are, like I said, inclusion, diversity, fairness, and like to like feed and like go and do the things you want to do, but having sort of an equal playing field. And at my university, which is collegiate, the 21 independent institutions that make up the University of Cambridge, opportunity couldn't be more important. Each college is so different, and we want to ensure that every college, wherever you end up, you have the same opportunity. And for me, particularly at the ending/middle of last term, there was a campaign that I started that got a lot of controversy around trying to abolish a ranking table that ranks the colleges and says, what students are more intelligent, what students are less intelligent. Got a lot of flack for that from some people, but also a lot of support. And it's that clarity, that knowing, this is how I see it. This is how I believe students could benefit from actually thinking of, opportunity, and not having things like ranking tables get away with that. It's one of the areas I think most acutely I was feeling much clarity on values, and I think I thank the change for that again.
Sure. That's interesting. No, we got anything to add on that? I suppose what I'm interested in is I think we've talked about the values, but it's the kind of like the distance travelled and how you've applied them over the last 6 months, like how it's changed, if they've changed.
They've changed. I had quite a tough first year in Gen Tech. Get hard times with the bridge from students. I think what helped was sort of like to rediscover my needs because of being sort of dehumanised in a way. So I'm not really sure. You got some people in the team even calling you right wing. Some people call you too hard left. And your own students calling you like a feminazi. And like having the ability to sort of like hone in that has helped. And I think it's helped me feel confident when I'm making decisions. I'm making them with the sort of right values in mind, and I'm comfortable with my values and that sort of thing. So again, I think it's sort of just why you're knowing that you're making conscious decisions about something, you know why you're doing it. On that basis, you can justify it better. It's sort of been a self-development bit to it too.
That's interesting, being able to reflect on a year in office and maybe how of course it's easier to lose those things than it is. Like, do you have anything to add to that one?
Values. I think values is so important to de-risk them and even started it off in terms of, I think definitely different things have happened this year. We've seen the safe space, there was a media storm again, and it was just really nice for me to have gone through my values, to be like, this is what I think, I've made this decision, and I'm not going to be necessarily wavering on that because you made a difficult decision. I think it was really good to just keep instilling, especially when you make decisions, because always, I don't think there's any ease, not everyone's ever going to agree with you. Exactly. So it's good when you're like, well, this is why I think that.
Yeah. I mean, that's the core purpose why it forms sort of this course in particular, I think. My final formal question was what one piece of advice would you have to somebody who's just starting as an officer? Whether you're saying again, no, obviously this is definitely your last term as Gen Tech. What would be your piece of advice to someone just going into Lead and Change, approaching the course?
I would just say get really stuck in and be really open about who you are and what you stand for. I think our group particularly it's a really interesting conversations and learn a lot from each other because we are so clear. And so I think it can be sometimes intimidating if you get big personality or groups, but I think just go into it sort of being really open-minded, no preconceptions, a good bit of plans. The political compassing is cool. But I just say just go in it with an open mind really, and try and really get the most out of the sessions and go to all the sessions and that sort of thing. Don't too much.
What's that's interesting about the network element of it and getting to know people and the building trust within the group. But I think I still speak to people who were in my tutor group because I tutored on the second week and know that they have a quite tight-knit group where they still bounce stuff off each other. Have you found that as well as a result of the course?
We've got a WhatsApp group. And no, it's been incredible actually. It's made such a difference to my year this year having that group of people, particularly when you're in a second year as a battle officer, you know so many people at university. All the time. I've got Warwick, Middlesex, Cardiff, see them at different days stuff. So it's really nice. It's great.
And then I guess if anything, just a sense check of someone who is, not a star member in your union, not a member of the university community, outside. That's helpful. What advice then, Priscilla? What would you say to someone coming?
Well, I have to second everything Nona said because she took them all out of my mouth. I was going to say the same thing. I would say do take it as an opportunity to get away as well. So do sort of prepare yourself to be in an environment and take a break. I mean, if you can be offline, I would say definitely do that because the distance you'll find from whether you're in a campus university or city university, Nona and myself, it does make a difference being out of that environment if you're lucky enough to not be hosting Lead and Change.
Maybe if you are hosting it, go to one.
Exactly. That would be a tip. Practically, I'd say do go to sleep at a real time so you don't miss beginning sessions because I think not be able to make the same kind of connections if you're the one always sort of showing up late or showing up halfway through.
Yeah.
And Nona's right, you do form really close-knit groups actually, and that's based on you sort of coming and showing up and giving your full like support to what's happening. I make the point about discussions as well. Do you care for people to have very different opinions to yourself?
Yeah.
I would say the same thing as Nona, that when I first started engaging with the US, I found it strange that it seemed there was so much, like there were so many sort of internal, what are to be assumptions about like everyone's political background, everyone's like views on everything. And I found that really strange because, of course, I got my Lead and Change group and people had very, very varying opinions. Only in those smaller groups, like a day in, that people started saying stuff and you were like, whoa, that's different. I didn't think that. But again, it really has to challenge you in your political opinion and to engage with those discussions. I had one discussion about lab and ladette culture, and obviously as a feminist, I was like, let's not try it. It was like, I don't know if I would necessarily engage with this right now, but it was a really nice opportunity to engage with various opinions from mine and actually come to a place where we were starting to agree on what patriarchy looks like and, X, Y, and Z. So,
absolutely, and there were similar discussions in my group as well, with a real wide spectrum of opinion. But it's funny that I think it's probably something around that distance from your union, the space to think of it differently, actually allows you to kind of get to just kind of consensus decision or discussion, come to an agreement or perhaps an agree to disagree situation, but in an environment which we don't create in student unions environments that often.
You don't often have the opportunity. Leading was the first time when I was coming away disagreeing with some people very much, but also respecting them. And that is very important and, really cool. Yeah,
that's really interesting. Now, do you have anything to add on that? I mean, in terms of a piece of advice for an incoming officer, what would you say?
I would say, turn up and then also kind of really put yourself in there to make them really good friends. I know Dan was our tutor, Lead and Change, and we just all really get on. We stood all together, we stood go out for dinner. We've actually had fat friends as we all call each other. It's really important to have those people to talk to, and we may not be politically aligned, we may not actually think the same way. Type of thing. I'm always someone who likes to be challenged and talk about things to different people. And also just really feeling that I didn't go to bed until like 3 every night, and I really enjoyed it. That's when we have these big conversations and just really put them out there. Don't talk to your other officers, because we're going to speak to them for the rest of the year. And just make sure you talk to other people and really start kind of go it. And it's okay if your head hurts by the end of it and you're more confused. That means you really thought about it.
Yeah. Some conflicting advice there on when to go to bed, but I think there's definitely something in investing in relationships that when you're on the course. Okay, cool. Well, that's all of my questions. I think that's been really, really interesting. I wanted to see if there's anybody listening who wanted to type anything. Any questions for our panel? Okay. Next, I'll just. We talked about them. But what we've tried to do is to reflect on the course as a whole, and to have a discussion about kind of what you take from what you took from Lead and Change. Information up now about the next course, and so part of this is about trying to encourage people to sign up to that and to get involved. And it sounds like from our panel that they would advocate for you to do that. So thanks for listening, and thanks again to the panel for coming in and discussing their reflections on last year. Much appreciated. Thank you. Thanks, Na.
Bye. Do I have now?
You can do. Thanks for dialing in.